Paige Doherty was born on April 17, 2000, in the Scottish town of Clydebank. From childhood, she stood out because of her kind heart and a level of maturity that was unusual for her age. With her smile, thoughtfulness, and willingness to help, she easily connected with people of all ages. Paige did not try to be the center of attention, but her presence was always felt. She was the oldest of 4 children and had a strong sense of responsibility, especially when it came to her younger siblings. Her mother was Pamela Munro, and she raised the family together with her husband, Andrew, Paige's stepfather. Their home was always full of movement and life. Of course, there were also difficulties, but everyone was connected by deep affection, sincere care, and emotional closeness. Paige had a particularly warm relationship with her younger siblings. She did not simply watch over them, she truly cared for them. From early age, she helped around the house and was not afraid to say what she thought when important things were being discussed. She was especially close to her younger brother Andrew, who needed additional attention. Paige often took him to the park or to the cinema. Those moments were not only important to him, they also meant a great deal to her. Paige knew early on what she wanted to do in life. She dreamed of becoming a stylist, a hairdresser, and a makeup artist. The world of fashion and beauty had always attracted her. She loved applying makeup, styling hair, experimenting with different looks, and following trends. By the age of 15, she already had clear goals. When she was offered the chance to help out on Saturdays at a local beauty salon, she took it very seriously. For her, it was not just a side job, it was the beginning of her future. Her colleagues described her as punctual, respectful, and eager to learn. Paige also had an active social life. Her social media pages were full of photos with friends and funny videos in which she laughed, joked, and demonstrated her beauty skills. She had many acquaintances, but her closest friend was Lauren. They spent a lot of time together. Sleepovers, confidential conversations, secrets, and plans for the future. Another important person in Paige's life was her boyfriend, Dylan Kane. Their relationship was young but genuine, full of care and warmth. They often texted each other, called every day, and talked about everything. He knew everything that was happening in her life, and according to those who knew them, he truly cared about her. Even one day apart was difficult for both of them. Paige's life was simple but meaningful. She often told her closest friends that she had big plans, but that she did not intend to leave her hometown. Her idea of success was not to run away, but to build her life in the place where she had grown up. Her actions spoke for themselves. She worked, learned, helped others, and cared for the people she loved. Not because she was forced to, but because she felt it was the right thing to do. From the outside, John Leathem appeared to be a typical middle-class man in Clydebank. The 32-year-old local businessman was married and the father of a young child. His wife, Katia Karbowiak, was from Poland. From the outside, their life seemed calm and orderly. A modest home near his work, a stable daily routine, care for their daughter, and walks together all created the image of a reliable man. John was well known in the neighborhood and maintained the image of a polite and balanced person. He ran a small shop called Delicious Deli, a mixture of a corner shop, a small cafe, and a delicatessen selling prepared food. It was located on a busy street not far from residential areas and a bus stop. Local residents, students, and workers from the neighboring streets were his regular customers. John often stood behind the counter himself, spoke with customers, and knew many of them personally. He was friendly, rarely showed anger, and was never openly disrespectful. Those who regularly came into his shop noticed nothing suspicious. He gave the impression of a calm, neat, perhaps slightly reserved man, but nothing about him seemed worrying. His business reputation was spotless. The shop was clean, well-stocked, and ran smoothly. No one could say anything bad about him. He had not been involved in scandals or dark stories, at least not until March 2016. Behind the image of a reliable family man, however, there were facts most people did not know. John had a twin brother named George Leathem. Few people knew about their connection, and unlike John, George had a criminal past. As early as 2003, when he was only 19 years old, George was convicted of a serious offense. He had attacked a woman, dragged her into bushes, and deliberately assaulted her. He received a 3-year probation sentence, was ordered to do community service, and was placed on the sex offenders register. The years passed, but George's behavior did not improve. In 2016, only a few days before a court hearing, he once again made headlines. Drunk, he appeared near a petrol station, armed with a knife and metal batons, and began threatening passers-by. Shortly afterward, he was taken into custody again. His life continued on a dangerous and chaotic path. In 2019, he committed another assault, this time at home. He attacked his pregnant wife and caused her serious injuries. Later, he was sentenced to 9 months in prison. John, on the other hand, had never been prosecuted. His record was clean. There were no complaints, no police reports, and nothing in the databases. On the evening of March 18, 2016, Paige stayed overnight at the home of her best friend, Lauren. It was an ordinary sleepover, the kind they often had together. The two friends spent such evenings talking about life, sharing personal stories, trying new makeup, and experimenting with hairstyles. Despite her age, Paige was already very organized. She knew she had to be at work early the next morning, so she set her alarm to make sure she woke up on time and did not miss her bus. The next morning, March 19th, Paige got up as planned, without rushing. She got dressed, said goodbye to Lauren, and walked to the bus stop. That was her usual Saturday routine. She followed a route she knew well. Normally, she went into the same shop every time. The owner, Ashi Ahmed, had known Paige since she was a child. She often stopped there before work to buy a sandwich or a drink. But on that day, something had changed. When she passed Ashi's shop, she only waved to him without going inside, and continued along the street. Only a few meters from her usual stop was John Leatham's shop. That morning, Paige decided to go in there. At exactly 8:21 in the morning, CCTV cameras recorded Paige approaching the delicatessen and entering it. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. From that moment on, she disappeared completely from view. When Paige did not arrive for her shift at the salon, alarm bells rang immediately. Her colleagues knew that she took her work very seriously. She was never late and never missed a shift without warning. Her phone was switched off. The salon team tried to call her, but there was no answer. They contacted her mother, Pamela, to tell her what had happened. Concern quickly turned into fear. Pamela also could not reach her, which was completely unlike Paige. Paige always answered messages and calls, especially from the people closest to her. At the same time, her boyfriend Dylan was also trying to reach her. None of his messages were read. Increasingly worried, he called the salon to ask whether she had arrived. When Dylan learned that Paige had not shown up for work and had not contacted anyone, his concern turned into panic. He and Pamela immediately checked her social media pages. She had always been very active online. She posted updates, replied to friends, and shared photos. But that day, there was nothing. No new posts, no replies, no sign of life. That silence online only increased the fear. For Paige, it was not merely unusual. Something like that simply did not happen. The hours passed, and there was still no message. It became clear that this was not just a delay or a small misunderstanding. Her family and friends already understood that something terrible had happened. Pamela contacted the police immediately. Considering the circumstances and everything known about Paige, the authorities classified her disappearance as high risk from the beginning. The possibility that she had run away, as sometimes happens with young people, was not seriously considered. The first phase of the search began. Relatives, friends, colleagues from the salon, and even neighbors came together. They called everyone they knew, printed and distributed leaflets, and searched for even the smallest clue. At that point, there was not a single lead, not one trace. Paige had disappeared within a matter of minutes. No one could have imagined that one ordinary decision, walking into the shop next door, would have fatal consequences. Meanwhile, the police carried out interviews at the same time. They reconstruct Paige's likely route from Lauren's home to the bus stop and tried to determine who might have seen her that morning. The shop owners along her route were questioned. CCTV recordings from the surrounding area were examined. Every deviation from her usual path drew attention. One day passed, but there was no new information. The absence of witnesses, evidence, and leads made the situation even more serious. The only clear time period investigators had was the few minutes during which Paige walked along the street and entered one of the shops. At that point, attention shifted to those shops. No one yet realized that the trail ended behind one of those doors. The search for Paige Doherty lasted 2 full days. Her family, volunteers, and the police did not give up hope of finding her alive. But on the morning of March 21st, 2016, that hope was destroyed. Her body was found by 2 passers-by in an abandoned strip of roadside land, about 1.5 miles from the bus stop she had been heading to that Saturday. The location was difficult to access and overgrown with dense vegetation. People rarely went there, which explained why the body had not been found earlier. The passers-by noticed a suspicious black bag on the ground. When they came closer, they realized there was a body inside. The police arrived quickly and sealed off the area. Even during the first examination, it became clear that Paige had died from multiple sharp force injuries. The post-mortem examinations recorded 61 stab wounds and 85 further cuts, many of them defensive injuries she had suffered while trying to protect herself. Her hands and forearms were especially affected, clear proof that Paige had fought desperately and with all her strength. Despite her small stature, Paige fought for her life. Some of the wounds to her head and neck were especially targeted and repeated. A deep wound to her neck caused massive blood loss. According to experts, that injury was fatal. The level of aggression shown during the attack left no doubt that this was not a random robbery or an assault that had gone wrong. There was a personal and emotional intensity to it. Investigators quickly ruled out the theory of a random attacker. The number of injuries, their location, and the extraordinary force of the blows all suggested that the attacker knew Paige, or at least attacked her with extreme rage. The crime was committed with fury, something often seen in cases motivated by personal hatred or resentment. The place where the body was found also raised many questions. It was away from the main road, not visible to passing cars, and difficult to reach. This was not a spontaneous decision. Whoever had done it either knew the area well or had chosen the location in advance in order to hide the traces of the crime. The way the body had been wrapped and placed clearly suggested that Paige had been brought there after the murder. News of the discovery of Paige's body spread immediately throughout Clydebank. For everyone who had taken part in the search, it was a devastating blow. The family was officially informed. Her mother, Pamela, could not accept the reality of what had happened. Dylan, Paige's boyfriend and one of the people closest to her, was completely devastated. Volunteers who had only the day before been putting up leaflets and sharing appeals for help were now writing messages of condolence. The whole area sank into collective grief. Meanwhile, the police began reviewing CCTV recordings and questioning everyone who might have seen Paige on the day she disappeared. Their goal was to trace her final steps and determine who had seen her last. It became clear that the crime had either been carefully planned or committed by someone who believed he could erase every trace. But in a town where cameras were positioned on many corners, disappearing without a trace was practically impossible. The investigation entered a decisive phase. Detectives focused on reconstructing Paige Doherty's route on the morning of March 19th. They requested recordings from all CCTV cameras along her usual path, from Lauren's home to the bus stop. 2 points stood out: the shop where she usually bought her breakfast and the nearby delicatessen, Delicious Deli, which she visited that morning. The breakthrough in the case came after a call to the police from the owner of the neighboring shop, Ashi Ahmed. He remembered seeing Paige that morning. She had waved to him, but had not come into his shop, which seemed strange to him. He remembered that his CCTV cameras covered a wide angle, so he reviewed the recording. On the video, Paige could clearly be seen walking along the street and entering the neighboring shop, John Leatham's Delicious Deli. The recording did not show her leaving. Ahmed immediately handed the video over to the police. Investigators studied the footage carefully and confirmed that Paige had entered Delicious Deli at 8:21 in the morning. After that, she was not seen leaving the shop. Around 8:31, neighboring shop owners noticed that the shutters had been pulled down. Later footage showed John Leathem leaving the shop, going to buy antibacterial wipes, bin bags, and bleach, and returning as part of his attempt to cover up the crime. The recordings also showed him placing a large black bin bag into the boot of his car. In court, CCTV evidence showed him carrying Paige's body in a bin liner to the boot after killing her inside the deli. Investigators realized they were looking at an attempt to dispose of a body, but that was only one part of a deeply disturbing sequence of events captured by cameras. Instead of immediately fleeing, Leathem repeatedly returned to the shop. He went in and out, trying to clean the premises, remove blood, and destroy evidence. The cameras recorded his movements, facial expression, and gestures. He appeared agitated and confused. At one point, he even changed clothes and later reopened the delicatessen to serve customers as though nothing had happened. A police team was sent to arrest him. After investigators reviewed the recording and gathered enough evidence, Leathem was taken into custody. At the same time, forensic experts began a detailed examination of his shop. At first glance, it's clean, but when refrigerated display units and shelves were moved, traces of blood were discovered underneath. The analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Paige Doherty. Every new piece of evidence made Leathem's position worse. His actions after Paige's disappearance had been recorded by cameras. He had not only tried to hide the body, but had also actively cleaned the crime scene, resumed business, and served customers. This suggested a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence rather than actions taken in a state of shock, as he would later claim. Alongside the arrest, investigators continued collecting evidence. They examined John Leathem's car and found traces of blood, despite obvious attempts to clean the vehicle thoroughly. Experts also examined the place where Paige's spot was and confirmed that the location matched the route connected with the disposal of her body. At that point, there was no longer any doubt. The CCTV recordings became the decisive evidence. The video showed who had last seen Paige, how the suspect behaved, and what he did step by step to cover his tracks. Ironically, the truth was not uncovered by his own cameras, but by the cameras of a neighboring business. After his arrest, John Leathem initially denied everything. He claimed that he did not know Paige Doherty and that she had never been inside his shop. He also insisted that there could not be any blood on his premises. But the police already had strong evidence. CCTV recordings, blood samples from the floor and from his car, and footage showing him moving a large bin bag. Faced with that evidence, Leathem changed his statement and confessed to the killing. In his explanation, he said that everything had happened in a state of panic. According to him, Paige came into the shop, placed an order, and asked whether he was looking for staff. He said he asked her age, and, when she told the truth, he refused to employ her because she was underage. Then, according to his version, Paige threatened to accuse him of inappropriate behavior if he did not give her a job. He claimed that he panicked because he feared false accusations and, influenced by memories of his brother's criminal past, grabbed a knife. Leathem described the moment as a sudden conflict. He said Paige began screaming and that he attacked her to silence her. When he realized she was dead, he wrapped the body, hid it, and later moved it. He claimed that he had hidden Paige's body in a shed near his home, before taking it to a wooded area near Great Western Road. Investigators carefully examined his version of events. First, there was no confirmation of the story about blackmail or threats. Paige was not known as aggressive or manipulative. Her mother, friends, and colleagues described her as a kind, calm, well-mannered young woman. She already had a job in a salon that she liked. There was no clear reason for her to desperately seek work elsewhere. Second, the forensic findings showed that the attack was not a simple outburst. It involved a sustained struggle and numerous injuries, which contradicted the idea of a brief loss of control. no evidence of sexual violence or of a personal relationship between Paige and Leathem was found. That made the motive for the crime even more mysterious. Leathem insisted that he had not meant to cause harm and that he had reacted to something he perceived as a threat. But the nature of the attack, more than 140 injuries, including stab wounds and cuts, many of them to the head, face, neck, and arms, left no doubt about its brutal cruelty. Based on the evidence collected, John Leathem was officially charged with murder. His confession, mixed with invented justifications, generated no sympathy among investigators or the public. From the beginning, it was clear that this was not a momentary lapse, but a calculated attempt to cover up a serious crime. And although the exact motive was never established, the scale and brutality of the attack spoke for themselves. As soon as the name John Leathem became public, attention quickly turned not only to him, but also to the people around him. In particular, interest grew in his twin brother, George Leathem. George's criminal past became widely discussed after Paige Doherty's death became known. Questions were raised about whether John's behavior could in some way be connected to family dynamics. During questioning, John himself referred to his brother and said that he had panicked because he did not want to repeat his brother's fate. He claimed he was afraid of accusations of inappropriate behavior and could not bear the shame that would come with them. Investigators, however, found no evidence that Paige had threatened him or tried to manipulate him. Even if his explanation were taken at face value, it raised even more questions. Why would a man who seemed stable and lived a normal life justify his actions through his brother's past? 7 months after the crime, the case against John Leathem reached court. By that time, investigators had gathered overwhelming evidence: CCTV recordings, forensic results, witness statements, and the accused man's own confession. His defense did not deny that he had killed Paige, but insisted that it had been sudden panic rather than premeditated murder. The court, however, had to evaluate not only the facts, but also Leathem's actions afterward and his behavior in the hours and days following the killing. The trial drew public attention. In the courtroom were members of Paige's family, journalists, campaigners, and ordinary residents of Clydebank, all trying to understand what had happened. The court found John Leathem guilty of intentionally committing a grave crime. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 27 years before he could apply for parole. For Paige's family, this was a step toward justice. As her mother said, it would not bring Paige back, but it at least guaranteed that the person who had taken her life would not be free in the near future. The court emphasized the brutality of the crime and Leathem's efforts to cover it up, rejecting the version of an emotional collapse or sudden panic. Despite the evidence and the public reaction, Leatham's defense appealed, arguing that the sentence was too harsh. They point to his lack of previous convictions, his family, his young daughter, and the fact that he had been regarded as a respected member of society. His lawyers insisted that the act had not been planned and that Leathem had shown remorse and therefore deserved leniency. This caused a wave of anger in Clydebank, especially among Paige's relatives and friends. Nevertheless, the appeal court reviewed the case and reduced the minimum term from 27 years to 23 years. The court referred to the absence of evidence of prior planning and the fact that Leathem had pleaded guilty. The decision caused sharp public criticism. To many, it looked like a reward for the offender. Paige's relatives publicly stated that they saw the reduction not only as an insult to themselves, but also to Paige's memory. Leatham's conduct after the crime, cleaning the crime scene, hiding the body, and trying to continue as if nothing had happened, did not show genuine remorse. John Leathem himself remained calm during the proceedings. He did not look directly at Paige's family and did not address them. His behavior was distant and emotionless. It created the impression that he had completely detached himself from the reality of what he had done. The final judgment left a bitter aftertaste. On the one hand, the offender was put behind bars. On the other, the realization that he could apply for release after just over 2 decades left many people with a deep feeling of injustice. The most important result, however, was that the crime received an official legal judgment, and Paige's family had the chance to speak publicly and share their pain. The court answered the question of who had done it, but the question of why remained unanswered. Thank you for watching, and take care of yourselves.